Hey guys, and welcome to a first here on TetraBitGaming. So 2019 has been another wild year for my Lost Bits series. With the Minecraft video being the last full Lost Bits of the year, I think I've covered something like 22 Lost Bits videos this year, each taking a look at some really cool content that's normally unseen or unused. As 2019 wraps up, I wanted to take a look back at the last year and talk about my 10 favorite Lost Bits of the year. Now no, not 10 whole videos themselves, but rather 10 individual bits that I discussed in said videos. These are of course based on my opinion, like I'm sure you might find some things more interesting or less interesting than I do. Oh yeah, and kind of one rule I gave myself is one lost bit per video limit. Anyways guys, let's roll it back and talk about some of the best of 2019's Lost Bits. Alright, kicking things off we have Sonic CD. There were a lot of Sonic Lost Bits this year, hey? That's of course largely in part due to the massive dump of the newly found prototypes that occurred from the Hidden Palace Zones and the Cutting Room Floor's Sonic Month. Anyway, my favorite new discovery from the Sonic CD prototypes was learning that before being named Palm Tree Panic, the first stage in Sonic CD was instead going to be called Salad Plain Zone. Yeah, not much of a name. I'm definitely glad they changed the name to be more fitting than something that sounds like a restaurant appetizer. Wii Sports had a lot of cool unused things like the scrapped airplane mode, as well as graphics that suggest that maybe billiards was going to be included as well. But what I think is the most interesting thing unused in Wii Sports was the golfing test room. If you've been watching Lost Bits for a while now, you'll know that I'm a sucker for test rooms like this, so obviously I'm biased, but this one was really cool. It just featured all these terrain variables in terms of land deformations. There were several bumps and curves, and even this weird ramp-like land deformation. There were also separate sections for grass and sand-type terrain, obviously to test how hitting the ball would be differently affected by them. Overall, a pretty solid and fun test room to fart around in. 2015's Super Mario Maker for the Wii U had a plethora of 8-bit costumes that were used in the original Super Mario Bros. Style of levels. Now, although Baby Metal, Bubbles from Clu Clu Land, and Shaun the Sheep made it into the game, it was cool to learn that there were actually 5 more 8-bit costumes that were referenced in the game's code, but I guess never made it into the final game. These costumes include a Golden Retriever costume, Mario from Super Mario Bros. 2, Muncher, Tetris, which was probably going to be either a single or multiple Tetrominoes, and finally, my favorite, apparently the Windows logo was going to be one of the 8-bit costumes. Now, while I think it would have been absolutely bonkers to play through Mario levels as a Windows logo, I guess I see why this was never added. With the release of Super Mario Maker 2 for the Switch, I guess these probably won't ever be added fully into the original game, but who knows, maybe one day we'll still see Tetrominoes in Super Mario Maker 2. I first covered the 1997 Space World beta of Pokemon Silver and Gold back in 2018, but it wasn't until early 2019 that I talked more about it in my Lost Bits on Pokemon Gen 2 with my boy, Vinny.
What up, pimps?
Now this beta features so many different things that were cut from the final version, including Pokemon, that when info about this beta was made public, it basically shook up the entire Pokemon fandom. Anyways, I thought it was really cool to learn how initially the whole area of Pokemon Gen 2 was planned to take place in the entire country of Japan. In the original map design, there were separate towns based on real-life Japanese regions such as Kyoto, Hokkaido, Mount Fuji, Osaka, and more. Instead, the decision was ultimately made to focus basing Johto on only the Kansai, Tokai, and Shikoku regions of Japan. I don't know, I guess I think seeing how much the map design changed from this beta to the final release was just so fascinating. Whereas the Pokemon Gold beta shook up Pokemon fans last year, this year the newly dumped Sonic 3 prototypes had basically the same effect for Sonic fans. Now, although seeing an early drop dash move in this Sonic 3 beta was shocking, to me the most surprising thing to witness during the initial Hidden Palace Zone livestream was hearing that basically the entire soundtrack was different than what we got in the final release. Instead, the soundtrack was the same one that was heard in the PC re-release of the game in the Sonic and Knuckles collection. Here's a quick comparison of one of the acts so you can kind of get an idea of how much these have changed. There's a whole alleged fiasco with how Michael Jackson, yes that Michael Jackson, and a few musicians he collaborated with, came to make the soundtrack we heard in the final release. So it was really fascinating to learn that perhaps the soundtrack of this prototype may have been the true original soundtrack. Like I mentioned earlier, Minecraft was the last full Lost Bits video of 2019, and surprisingly, it's so far my fastest growing one, I think, ever. Since Minecraft has had like infinity updates, there has been a ton of stuff that has been removed over the years. But surprisingly, this thing has been around since the 1.8 update of the game and is still in the game to this day as I'm making this video. This thing is of course the hidden debug world, which houses basically every available block in that build that you're playing, be it used or unused. Everything from lava blocks to beds to even the nether and end portals, which surprisingly still work. I think it's really cool to see all the different styles and types of blocks organized in a single area like this. Now, I really doubt many of you may think this is as cool as I do, but in the Super Smash Bros. Brawl Lost Bits video, I discussed an apparently scrapped feature that would have had characters show external wear and tear when taking enough damage in a fight. This is believed to have been the case based on several unused character and item textures with cracks. These textures were for Meta Knight's mask, Link's sword and shield, Iconmarth's sword, Lucas's stick, and Captain Falcon's helmet. Captain Falcon's helmet is especially interesting as it would crack to reveal Captain Falcon's right eye, which is actually the only one he has modeled, only giving more credence to this theory. I guess this was canned because with the Wii's max normal resolution of 480i, most people probably wouldn't be able to make out these small details on their TVs. Regardless, if it is true that even some of the weapons were planned to be breakable, this could have been a completely game-changing mechanic. Yeah, even more so than tripping. Another thing that I'm sure people don't think is as fascinating as I do is the shadow test map from Super Monkey Ball. This was something I've never seen before, but this entire mode was developed in order to test how light and shadows worked in the engine. You get to guide this weird sun-shaped object thing around and see how it and the pillars produce shadows from the light source. You can also not only move around the origin point of the light source, but you can also toggle a view that shows exactly how the light rays are going to be projected and blocked by objects. Man, Sega was ahead of its time. They were doing ray tracing back in like 2001. I don't know what it was, but there was just something so relaxing and fascinating about just playing around in this test room. By far, I think this is one of the coolest normally unused things I ever got to play around with so far in this series. Being one of my all-time favorite games, I was really happy to finally cover Banjo-Kazooie on my channel, and even more happy to see Banjo finally make it into Smash. In the Banjo-Kazooie Lost Bits video, we went over a lot of stuff, like various unused graphics, the early development of the game on both the Super Nintendo and N64 when Banjo was supposed to be a skater, as well as being able to play around in a test room and the ending cutscene. But my absolute favorite thing was to be able to actually play around in the intro cutscene. Here we saw giant models of all the characters, as well as a behind-the-scenes look at how the scene played out in real time. We also got to see a creepy, looming yellow Jinjo off in the distance, not once, but twice. Having seen this cutscene hundreds, if not thousands of times in my life, it was almost a magical experience to not only see it from a different perspective, but also be able to control Banjo and Kazooie around in it as if it were a regular stage. Before we get to my favorite lost bit of 2019, a few more things. First is the best lost bit of the year as decided by you guys. I ran this poll on Twitter as well as on a YouTube community tab post, and I asked you guys what were some of your favorite lost bits that I covered this year. Well, the results are in, and the top 3 lost bits as chosen by you guys are, at number 3, just barely beating out the characters that were scrapped from Super Smash Bros. Brawl, is the Sonic 3 Michael Jackson soundtrack I went over earlier. Then at number 2 is the Debug world from Minecraft I also discussed. And then the number 1 lost bit chosen by you guys was the Minecraft April Fool's joke from 2011 that was since removed from the game. This April Fool's joke featured a locked chest that would lead to a fake microtransaction store page filled with goodies such as enlargement pills, disguises, and an actual response from supports. As an added bonus, if you actually tried purchasing an item, you would get jump scared by a dinosaur. And furthermore, if you tried buying over $10,000 worth of items, a prompt would pop up on screen to not continue if you're photosensitive. And after bypassing that warning, the whole storefront would start flashing all sorts of different colors. Definitely one of the better April Fool's jokes I've ever seen in a game. And next, I just wanted to quickly give a shout out to some honorable mentions that I think were awesome but didn't quite make it to the list. These lost bits are the unused early development concepts from Splatoon, which featured rabbits as well as literal blocks of tofu shooting ink, the several normally inaccessible stages in Crash Bandicoot, including the famous scrapped level Stormy Ascent, which was later added to the Insane Trilogy remake, and of course the hidden text string in Wario World that simply and quite eloquently just said "fuck." Can't forget that one. And now, on to the number 1 spot. By far, what I think is not only the coolest lost bit of 2019, but possibly in the entire series to date, is the absolute pile of unused test levels that I had the pleasure of playing through in Yoshi's Woolly World. It's not too often that I make new discoveries myself, and although I doubt I truly was the first on Earth to access these, I couldn't find anything about most of them documented anywhere, so it was like treading in new undiscovered territory. And when I say there was a pile of unused levels, I really mean a pile. Like, I think I spent over 20 minutes going through most of them in the video, which translated to me playing like 4 hours of this in real time. These unused levels ranged from very basic areas with invisible obstacle collision and some dummy blocks, to much more fleshed out stages looking like they were ready for release, and everything in between. Several of the stages also tested features that weren't really used in the final game, like a perspective changing mechanic. And furthermore, some of the more finished looking levels had a completely different aesthetic than the rest of the game. This supports the notion that originally this game was going to take place inside of a big house, and be more centered around platforming in said home, as well as crafts the home residents were making, rather than just a woolly Yoshi world. Like here we see this wall tapestry, here this light and shadow coming from a windowsill, and then there's this whole unused stage. Although I really do like Woolly World's art style, I'm not gonna lie, it would have been also really cool to play as Yoshi inside of someone's house like this. Fingers crossed that this idea gets revisited by Nintendo sometime in the future. It was just so much fun to explore these woolly, uncharted territories and see all these test rooms that I absolutely think it's my favorite lost bit of 2019. And there you have it, guys, my top 10 lost bits from 2019, and I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what some of your favorite lost bits were this year down below, and let me know if you'd like to see this in 2020 and beyond. If you haven't already, be sure to check out all of these lost bits I mentioned to get more info about them by clicking on the card right here to see the full playlist. If you want to stay up to date, be sure to subscribe here, swing by my other social media things, which are all linked in the description below, and if you want to support the channel, check out my merch over at TetraBitGaming.com, or consider becoming the latest member of the Bit Club. Click on the join button below if you want more information. And of course, thank you all so much for supporting me, this series, and the channel this year. So, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in 2020 and beyond. And of course, I will see you in a bit.